Welcome to the In Pursuit of Luxury podcast. I'm Shaun Borstrock. On today's episode, I'm thrilled to chat with Otis Ingrams. Otis is the founder and creative director of OTZI, a Norfolk-based design studio dedicated to creating heirloom furniture and leather goods that define the intersection of traditional craft and contemporary precision. Driven by a desire to create objects of permanence, Otis spent a decade honing his craft before establishing OTZI to make sustainable, material-focused furniture and objects of use. Otis's path is marked by a deep commitment to integrity of materials and of traditional craftsmanship. He started out doing a pivotal stint at the renowned Bill Amberg studio. After continuing to develop his craft on his own, he eventually became a Quest Leather Sellers Company scholar, through which he completed an MA in product design and furniture design from Kingston University. OTZI was started in earnest in 2020, and since then the workshops have evolved to apply traditional leatherworking and woodworking, as well as modern manufacturing capabilities with Otis's innovative techniques and designs. Under Otis's creative direction, OTZI has developed an ever-widening collection and secured high-profile global collaborations and commissions that speak to his versatility and technical authority. Projects include a limited edition chair for Zara Home, a series of sculptural handcrafted furniture for Chloe stores worldwide, and a bespoke commission for Lexus's In Search of Takumi series. Otis Ingrams, welcome to the In Pursuit of Luxury podcast.
Hello.
Hello.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming. You didn't come from far.
No, not far, no.
So that's quite good. Actually, we could have come together because I don't live far from Shepherd's Bush.
Okay, yeah.
Anyway, so tell us about yourself. Tell us how you got into Otis with a Z.
Otis with a Z, yeah. I mean, it's relatively close, isn't it? But I thought it was, when I was coming up with the name, I remember very clearly, actually, I was sort of like going through it at the kitchen table at my mum's flat, and I didn't want to have that brand name, which was just the name of you as an individual. I don't know. I wanted there to be some distance, and it's obviously not, I've not come up with like a totally random name, but basically there was a man who was dug up in the OTZI Alps in the middle of Europe, and he was about 5,000 years old, and they called him OTZI, the Iceman. But he was perfectly sort of preserved in this peat bog environment. But he had shoes that had soles, and they had uppers, and he had a cape on, and he had a bag, and it's like the oldest preserved shoes and bags that we have, and a lot of the techniques that he'd used, we still used. Really, they were sewn, they were all cut, they were shaped, and I just thought it was very loose play on my name, and I was doing like pretty much the same thing. So, right. So that's how it kind of stuck. But I started doing leatherwork when I was at university. I actually studied English and American literature up at UEA in Norwich, and I thought I was going to go and sort of have some kind of like literary career, and then I just sort of like I did an exchange trip over in America in San Francisco, and I went to a lot of the menswear stores there. There were some really nice ones, and then I noticed that a lot of the leatherwork there was quite. I guess it's not like it was rustic, but it had that kind of like frontiers quality. You know, there's like an American aesthetic which is very like carefree, and it doesn't have the same. I guess it's not sort of refinement, but it doesn't have that same aesthetic sensibilities that like European leatherwork might have, something like Hermes or Louis Vuitton, and so. It seemed, and it was actually really quite expensive, and so it sort of seemed relatively achievable for someone who was just a student who wanted to have a crack at making like some belts or some bags, and so I took that away, and then I started making those pieces in my bedroom at university, and then when I came back to London, I sort of tried to get jobs in the literary work, like at agencies or something, and publishing, and I was like turned away despite sort of having a good degree. and I was like ready to go and do it. And so then I was sort of spurned from that, and I probably, like a lot of people, turned to sort of craft things as some kind of form of therapy to to deal with something. And there was a shoe shop on the Uxbridge Road, which was run by this wonderful guy, and it's actually shut down since. But it was this South Asian family, and they had like bundles of leather outside, and so I just walked there, and I was able to buy some brightly coloured goat skins and some pieces of leather, and so I could just sort of start cobbling together stuff. And then I knew that there was this leather craftsman and designer, Bill Amberg, and that he was also from West London, and we sort of had a few connections through that. And so I knocked on his door with like a few pieces that I'd made, and then I honestly, if I look back at them now, they're like they look as if the kind of OTZI the Iceman had actually made them. They're pretty rustic. But I really enjoy making them. And anyway, I went over to Bill's and I was like, can you give me a job? Can I try this? And he was like, these are not, I can see that they're fine, but go and get a bit better. And so I did. And so I started working on some film and TV, and I was doing like art department, I think, and doing a bit of art direction stuff. But I was still doing this leather work, and I was like falling in love with it, really. And so then I just like kept pursuing it. I went back to Bill's and I was like, can I do some more work? And he's like, yeah, okay, fine, you're good enough. And then I did about 8 or 9 months there, and then that kind of really opened my eyes, because Bill was working on the incredible projects, working with it in ways that I'd never really imagined. And I mean, he's like really one of the sort of like founding leather craftsmen, definitely in the UK, and working on this amazing scale, doing like hotel lobbies and flooring, and being really innovative with it as a material. And so that's when I really kind of properly fell in love with it. And I left that probably too soon, I think, because there was a lot to learn still there. And when you're just like young and naive and passionate, and you just want to like strike out or do something else, and so that's kind of how it all started, really. Right. Sorry, that was a very long answer to your question.
No, that's a good answer. I think the best conversations are where I say the least. So what was the first thing you made?
I think the first thing I made was like a backpack, I think.
Oh, that's quite.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not just a belt.
It wasn't just a belt. It was like a backpack and some card holders. There were like some they call them pony hide, but it's normally just a cow hide, but with some funky print on it. And then it was lined. But I'd sort of like made my own tools, or I'd like refashioned some tools. Right. So the stitching was all kind of really janky. And I'd managed to find like a deer antler, and I'd sort of turned that into a horn. And I think I took it to like a music festival. And everyone being like, "Oh yeah, I love that bag," but I think I'd probably not realised all those people were like really high, and so it was just like, but it wasn't like maybe a genuine compliment. But I took it as one, and so that kind of enthusiasm was like, oh, okay, I guess I could try it out, at least try it.
Yeah, and so how have you done any like leatherwork training, or are you self-taught?
The training was like really just as a lot of people do it now. I think if I had like no one in my family had done anything similar, and I definitely not trained to do anything like that. So really, I was like just teaching myself at home, and it was only when I went over to Bill Amberg's was that's when I got some kind of formal training. And then there was a saddler there. There were some really amazing craftspeople there who had been doing it for like over a decade, and so and really it was like super hands-on and quite high pressure. But I think that's probably the best way to learn, really. Yeah. So
tell us about the setup now. It's in Norfolk, isn't it?
It's in Norfolk now, and we've got 2 workshops. We've got a leather workshop and a wood workshop. They're next to each other, which I tried like to have the wood and the leather in one place. When we first moved up to Norfolk, it was actually in the pandemic, and it was very a cottage with a very small workshop. And then during COVID, we took on like a lot of work, and I sort of like reinvested all of that into getting a place, taking on like a commercial lease, and I'd set up the wood workshop separately on the other side of this estate that we're on, and we only made like 2 pieces of furniture, and then the chap next to us was like, "I'm moving. Would you like to take this unit?" And I thought, well, yeah. I mean, that saves me having to just drag everything all the way across the estate, of course. But I thought I hadn't realised the sort of ramifications of that. But now we've got a lovely setup, and we've got a really nice wood workshop and a leather workshop next to each other, which is really nice.
And so, what are the things you make the most of? Because you've got like, is it homeware and you've got furniture?
Yeah, so it's homeware, and then there's 2 things. We call them objects of use, and so I think we're basically like a luxury utility brand, I would say, and that's what we're trying to sort of become. And so everything has like a real purpose to it. It's really, really functional. So we sell these leather baskets. We do log baskets. We call them general purpose sort of utility baskets. And then we have got a range of furniture, which is from dining chairs to armchairs. We've released like a new Ottoman range. And so we're trying to just sort of slowly build up each side. But the leather interiors pieces are the things that have driven the business to where it was now.
Tell us about the materials. I'm interested because I've seen the stuff. I mean, I've seen chairs and I've seen the baskets and things.
Yeah.
Tell us about the materials you use, the leathers, the processing, and why that is kind of unique to you.
We take our materials really seriously. We're a material-led workshop, and I think that it's really important to really take those material considerations seriously, because they're the foundation of the work. All of our work is very transparently made. It's really, really solid. We don't really laminate lots of stuff together. And the leather that we partner with a tannery down in Devon called J&FJ Bakers, and they're Britain's last oak bark tannery. There's been a tannery there since the Roman times, and in its current iteration, it's in its 3rd or 4th generation under the Parr family. And the leather they make there, I think, is probably some of the best in the world. It takes over a year to make each piece, from start to finish.
Yeah, why is that?
Because if you tan leather very quickly, it becomes quite sort of brittle, especially if you're doing it in like an organic way. So there's vegetable tanning, and there's oak bark tanning, and then there's chrome tanning or mineral tanning. And traditionally, leather was always vegetable tanned or pit tanned or bark tanned with natural barks and leaves and organic matter. And then when they invented chrome tanning, it's much, much quicker. And so most fashion leathers are chrome tanned now, and for shoes as well. And you get a very high performing leather, but you lose quite a lot of the natural characteristics from it. And so maybe only 10% of the world's leather is now vegetable tanned, and even within that, you probably get down to 1 or 2%. I mean, the baker's leather is points of a percentage of what the kind of leather that is produced. I think it's really valuable to keep places like that going and to promote that, because it is an incredibly pure, beautiful material that will last over 100 years. And so we're just really custodians of that material, I think.
Yeah, I mean that's why I was interested in talking to you, because I think in the same way that it's incredibly important to kind of preserve these the skills and craftsmanship and methods, and what we often lose sight of when we are confronted with luxury brands is that they don't necessarily work in that same way, because they're mass producing, and you know whether it's it could be any material, whether it's silk. I mean, shouldn't be using silk anyway, but whether it's leather or cotton or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
And I think when talking about things that I didn't know, obviously the tannery and the process and the amount of time it takes to make or to what are you doing with what's it called? What are you doing when you're tanning the skin?
When you're tanning it, you're
Yeah.
turning it from
Yeah,
just from the raw skin into, you're converting it into a totally different material.
Yeah.
But that conversion, so you're extracting the water out of the material, and you put it in these pits of the bark liquor,
Yeah.
so like a tea.
Yeah.
And it's an increased strength over the course of the year.
Right.
But if you exposed that skin to the full blast of the tannin straight away,
Yeah.
you would just penetrate not very deeply, and so
Right.
you'd end up with like quite a brittle, not very nice. So you have to do
Yeah.
it incrementally, and then once you put all of the oils and the waxes and the fat liquors into it, you create something which is not only like incredibly strong, but it also has like this wonderful softness to it. So you get the kind of best of both worlds.
Because I've been to tanneries. I have been to tanneries, and there used to be one in Somerset called, did I tell you that, Fenland?
Oh, right.
But I don't think they're still there anymore. And they were doing exactly that.
Yeah.
But this is like 20 odd years ago. So there are not many tanneries left then in the UK.
No, I mean there's probably like fewer than 10.
Wow.
From thousands of micro tanneries, and that's, I think, and it's a very difficult industry to run, and obviously it's like quite an unpleasant front end of the business. I think it's something that is kind of revitalizing. We work with a good friend of ours, Jack Millington, who runs a company called Billy Tannery. He's set up one of the UK's only micro tanneries, and he's taken equipment from some of these fallen tanneries,
Right.
and he's producing wild deer leather and goat leather, which has been, it's just taken from estates and from farms, and he's sort of repurposing these kind of unwanted hides. And so that's like a really nice success story. And so we're working with him to use that on some of our furniture pieces. It's got an amazing narrative behind it.
Yeah.
And it's a beautiful material, which, like was some of the earliest leather that would have been produced hundreds of years ago.
Yeah. Tell us about the wood. So we now know about the leather.
Yeah.
Where's the wood come from?
So the wood comes from, locally sourced woodlands. I mean, up and down the UK, but we work really closely with an amazing timber supplier and a miller down in Suffolk. And that that timber is air dried over a few years, and then it's kiln dried for that last bit. And so it's the same thing as the leather work. When you're using these materials, they've really gone through an amazing process over a number of years. It's very slow, and people don't want to like let the material out early until it's ready. So you're just thinking in these kind of like half decade kind of time errors. But that's where all of our timber comes from, and quite often they know the woodland managers, and they know the foresters where they're getting it from, so they can kind of tell you exactly where the trees have come from.
Right. And what type of timber is it? Is it varied?
Yeah, it's varied. So we work with ash, we work with oak, we work with elm. Some of the last elm you can get is really up in Scotland. It all died out from Dutch elm disease, but there are managed stocks up in Scotland. We work with sweet chestnut, and we've discovered that you can fume sweet chestnut, and we fume oak. And so what's really nice, and we do that with like a natural ammonia, but you get a natural finish, so you haven't had to put any real chemical on it, and so it's just exposed to the gases of the ammonia, and it darkens it right down. And so it's very nice from like a design and a product perspective, because you can offer the same piece but give it like a totally different finish.
Yeah. And who's the designer? Are you the designer? Do you design?
Yeah, I'm the only
work?
designer. Yeah.
Okay.
But I mean, I get help from people in the workshop. Quite often we'll get an idea, and it might even be from an interior designer. It might say, "Oh, I'd like to make this piece," and sometimes that's very nice because you've been wanting to make that piece anyway. Or if it's a range, I'm trying to think about how to fuse the two workshops together. So how to make the best out of the wood and the leather, and I think that there's, I think that's a very nice mix of materials.
Yeah. And so, where does the inspiration come from? What and who inspires you?
Designers like, I love people like Carl Auerbach. I think who's that, that's a company that's still in the same sort of family. It's been going for ages. And I like Jack Adney, who did a lot of work for Hermes in the something like 40s, 50s. Yeah. People like Borger Mogensen. So I guess it's sort of, mid-century, early 20th century designers that I think those are the people that I really admire and aspire to.
I was speaking to a friend of mine the other day about furniture and about what makes something like timeless. Mm-hmm. Timeless? Yeah, what makes something timeless? And we were talking specifically about furniture from the kind of Danish furniture,
right?
Because I was saying, if you think about furniture, so most of the timeless stuff seems to come from Denmark.
Yeah.
And then she was talking about Urkel. And I was saying, but Urkel, some of it might be, but it's quite clunky, isn't it? Do you're familiar with?
Yeah.
What do you think makes something timeless?
Well, that's such a difficult question, isn't it?
So, or the question is, one of those the amazing sideboard you've made with the leather drawers, or one of the, the kind of low set chairs.
Yeah.
Is that your timelessness?
I mean, I would like to say that I could put a timeless quality to most of the pieces, and the idea is that they have this universality to them. That means you can put them in a lot of different contexts, and they will fit in, or they will be appealing in that context, regardless of just putting them in like a modernist environment or kind of like a Georgian environment. But I think that's what I kind of like strive for. But I think that's like proportion. Yeah. I think there's a certain amount of like minimalism, but not in a kind of very like pure, like someone like Müller van Severen or like a modern designer where it's like really, really, really reduced. And so I think what I try and do is like put detail in, but there's the detail is very considered, and there's like a bit of it, but it doesn't like dominate the whole piece. So if we do something that's like stitching, there will be stitching. It will make up a proportion of the piece, but there's a restraint to it, and you let the materials, like for me in the design, I always like to let the materials like take the center stage, I think, and then I think that gives you quite a good grounding for what it can make a timeless piece. And if you look at like work that has stood the test of time and is not part of like a trend cycle, those kind of pieces have those kind of qualities.
Because you also talk about the patina and kind of the touch. Yeah, I mean that's obviously an important part of kind of your narrative.
Yes, yeah, hugely. Because if you're using these, very well sourced and very well kind of procured materials that have been like crafted in their own right in the way that they're produced by millers and by the tanners. Yeah, you've already got a really good starting point. So that's why we take the material consideration into account from the beginning. If you do too much of it, you kind of lose that beauty and that quality that they have. And so you just like select very carefully what you're using. But the thing is, they will because they're so well made inherently, or they've been so well cared for. They will stand the test of time. They will stand decades of use.
Yeah, I mean, I find quite interesting. So you will buy. I'll use the sideboard because that's something that you use very differently to sitting in a chair.
Yes.
And so the drawers are fronted with leather.
Yeah.
I'm sure Chris will very cleverly add visual, so you know, the viewers can, or the listeners won't see it. The viewers will see it.
Yeah.
What I'm talking about. So you've got this front facing. You've got drawers covered in leather.
Yeah.
You've got some leather covering, and the touch of that. What you're saying is that kind of the more you touch it, the patina is going to develop over time,
Yeah.
and that becomes more of what kind of is. Makes the thing more valuable in terms of the usage.
Yeah, and it's a reflection of the life of the relationship. I mean, that's what's nice about incredibly well-made work is that you have a relationship with this thing. It's in your life for decades.
Yeah.
And so it's nice to know that you've got the handles of a solid wood with the kind of bridle leather lacing spiraling down them, and then the doors are hand stitched on there with this very nice, it's called vachetta leather, which is from Italy, and it's finished, but it's not very heavily finished, so it has this like very nice softness to it. So there's a tactility to it. And I think that's what's nice. You get this like very nice tactile work, and it invites engagement. And that's what I think is a marker of good work, is that you want to kind of use it. You get real pleasure from using it. And I think that's it. They'll look totally different over the time. And we always try and say to people, it's like, when you're buying this piece, you're going to have it for a really long time. Yeah. It's going to look different down the line, but it will look better for it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean that's interesting to me, because the typical conversation about furniture is that it needs to be pristine.
Yeah.
But this is about inhabiting the piece of furniture, not the furniture inhabiting you.
Yeah.
Which
it's a bit of an inversion of that, and I mean, especially in the leather world, people are used to very heavily finished leathers now.
Yeah.
And I think people don't sort of realise that actually that heavily finished leather ages very poorly, and that's why you can go to like lots of hospitality environments or something, and if it's not, if it's looking a bit aged or something, you can see, and it's basically the finish will kind of come off, and quite often it's like an acrylic finish.
Yeah.
And it's not that you can put conditioner or wax it. You can't just put a natural product on it and buff it back. And that's a lot of that amazing Danish seating from the mid-century. It looks so beautiful because it's worn its age so well, and it kind of ends up sort of glowing as a result. It doesn't have that flat. It has life in it.
Yeah. So you were talking about the drawers and the finishes and the lacing.
Yeah.
Is everything, is it saddle stitched or is it machine stitched?
No, it's saddle stitched. Yeah. So we do a mixture in most of our pieces of traditional saddle stitching, which is when you're getting one long piece of linen thread with a needle on each end, and then you're hand stitching and crossing the thread over all the way through the piece.
Yeah.
And then you've got the machine stitch, which is two separate spools of thread, and they interlock in the middle of the piece. And the reason why the saddle stitching is much better and much stronger is because it's locked in that middle section. And so with one, if it were to come undone, it wouldn't just unravel, which is why like a machine thread would have more of a propensity to do that. But we basically put hand stitching in most of our work, and we do. We've got a mirror range and a tray range called our bolster series, and we do something called a butt stitch, which is something you would find on traditional like hunting and military work. So you saw it on a lot of those old leather wrapped flasks or cigar cases, very fine work. And then you even saw it on a lot of like Swiss military backpacks was the last time they did a lot of it. But obviously like for the World War I and II, there was like a huge amount of leather work needed for that. But that's very beautiful because you go through the side of the leather. It's very difficult, so you have to get like a diamond awl, and you have to make each hole incredibly carefully through the side of this leather that's only a few millimeters thick, and then you're joining them edge on, and so you can create and it's very nice and flat, and you get this really nice sort of chevron effect. It's really, really strong, and not that really many people do it anymore, but we like to do it in our work because it really gives that piece like a really lovely defining quality to it, I think. Yeah.
So are all the holes made by hand?
Yeah.
When you saddle stitch?
Yeah. So you have something called a pricking iron, which looks a bit like a sort of metal hand.
Yeah.
and depending on the thickness and the fineness of the leather, you can get different widths.
Yeah.
So we do that. We do that on our quarto baskets, and a lot of our baskets we will close, and our taper tables we'll machine stitch 3 of the panels, and then we will close it, and then we will hand stitch that final seam.
Interesting. Okay,
Yeah.
I now have remembered what I was going to say.
Yeah.
Have you seen a guy called Tanner Leatherstein?
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Because what's interesting about him is kind of how he dissects all the bags and also looks at the quality of the leather, which is what you were just referring to.
Yeah.
And that most leather might not even be leather.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, I mean, when I was doing bags and sort of some accessories, is that people would always bring me things to repair, and you could immediately say, like, it's made out of pleather, or it's a canvas that is painted. And a lot of people still think that, like, the Louis Vuitton sort of monochrome logo bags, that main part, that middle part with the logos on it, is leather.
Yeah.
But it's kind of just a grained plastic on canvas.
Yeah.
It's not to say it's like a bad material, but it's just not. It's not leather.
Yeah, I'd say it is a bad material. It's polyvinyl, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not a nice. It's not a nice.
The process
material.
to get to it is not great.
No.
I am quite vocal about that.
Yeah. Sure. No, it's like, but that's part of the thing that we try and do, is have this material understanding, and we try and get that across to our clients.
Yeah.
Because it's very easy to replicate, like really nice materials, and people, you can still get products that are like dipped in something that looks like a wood grain.
Yeah.
But it's like a kind of weird. Have you ever seen that?
Yeah.
And it's very easy to emulate certain types of leather just with kind of plastic finish. Yeah. And so we're trying to kind of be an antidote to that. And I think the Tanner Leatherstein thing is amazing, because it's really, as a consumer, it's very difficult to work out what is what, or what is real, or what you're being sold. And they're so expensive now, some of these products. I think if you're going to invest in them, you should know what they're made from.
Yeah, well, you say that, I was just thinking, it's the new Chanel shirt, white cotton shirt, is about £4,500.
I saw that, yeah. And a new handbag is like £14,000. Yeah.
Yeah, it could buy 1.5 of your chairs.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, see?
Yeah.
And that's going to last you a lifetime.
Yeah.
And you'll probably get more use out of it.
Yeah. Well, and the sheer amount of material and the time that it's taken to make.
And that's an interesting conversation to have, isn't it? Is that the justification for a handbag costing that amount of money, and then the justification for a piece of furniture or a product you've made, which you can return to the source, which is either you or the guys or girls in the workshop who are, physically making the product. You couldn't go back to the Chanel handbag factory and say, who made this? Yeah,
absolutely. Not only who made it, but like where are all the components from?
Yeah.
And quite often you will not be able to, if you really wanted to, we could know, where the hide came from, and where the wood came, where the tree was. There's not many places where you can do that, and you definitely can't do that with the bigger brands. And I think like what's quite amazing about small brand luxury businesses is that you're able to have that kind of closeness to them. Which, I mean, it's really, really nice. And also the value is really, really good. Because if you were to buy the same piece from a much bigger company, it'd be 5 or 6 times as much.
Yeah, and at least. The value is the value is different. But I was thinking about, this idea of luxury, and then the idea of the work that you produce, and then the mass production, where it might be, I don't know, Vitra, who are mass producing product, and they are considered a luxury brand, and then you talking about yourself as luxury. How do you reconcile those two slightly different interpretations of luxury?
I think it's quite sort of mercurial word, luxury, in that it has. That's what's interesting about it as like a concept, is that everyone has a kind of different vision of it. Everyone has like it means different things to different people, and that's what's quite fun exploring it. And I was like thinking on the way here, like what would my take on it? What I think it would be, but I like quite a lot of it is. It's just like the time and the consideration. I mean, from Vitra's perspective, it might be the time and the research that's been put into making like a really incredible like office chair. I know there are examples where they would, and that there is a luxury in that, and that you've had a huge company like spending ages refining and refining and refining. I think from our side is like you've got having these like amazing heritage skills and having people make these things from scratch. For you, and that the material provenance has been really, really carefully considered, and that it's like a chain of custody from the beginning, from these raw materials, all the way that those different businesses have cared for that material, quite humble material in the original. And if you've got, when we do upholstery, we'll have like a linen or wool mix, or even them, but they've all been really cared for, and I think like there's a luxury in that. Definitely.
Yeah, you see, so that's where I find it difficult to say that the Vitra is a luxury item.
Yeah.
Because when you're explaining what you do, and my kind of mission in life is about, the preservation of craft.
Yeah.
Within the confines of this definition of luxury.
Yes.
Which I think can't. This is just me. Luxury can be anything to anybody.
Yeah.
I was talking to Julian Vogel, and we were talking about a Chanel lipstick. That to somebody, that's luxury. Of course, it might be, but the product is not luxury.
No.
Really, it's what you're buying into is the luxury, because it's Chanel. The packaging might cost more than the actual lipstick that's in it.
Yeah.
But when you're looking at kind of if you're looking at it from my point of view, or the way I look at it, which is my point of view, I find it difficult, as I said, to think about luxury being something that is mass produced. For me, there's so much loss of kind of traditional craftsmanship. You're just saying there used to be tanneries, there's now 10.
Yeah.
There used to be manufacturers in the UK. Used to be a manufacturing powerhouse.
Yeah.
Where's the manufacturing? Everybody's going abroad to manufacture, and that's simply because we've lost everything to mass production.
Yeah, and we've offshored everything. Yeah, absolutely. And I think to know that, to be able to just like call up the people that you are buying the thing from, and you could just have a conversation with the people who are making your work, or you could even go to their workshop and you can commission a totally bespoke piece, and you can have something like really incredibly personal and considered all the way through from the tiniest detail. That's like really fantastic in terms of like what luxury can get you. And I think that's real true luxury, isn't it?
No, and that's the thing, is that and that's exactly. I mean, that's the point. Is that like if everything is luxury, what's luxury?
Yeah, I mean that was like what craft got. When craft got converted into like. You'd have like you'd have like sandwich artisans, and you'd get like food brands would try and say that everything is like craft and everything's like crafted.
Yeah.
And then there was a whole kind of dialogue around what craft is, and then people were saying like, well, there was that book Craftland that came out recently, and people were saying that craft is like a way of living, and that you would say that it's not. A lot of it is not luxurious. It's like a very hard way of living, and you're just producing these things for daily life. But you can recontextualize that and say that things that are like totally handmade, no matter how humble they are, there is a luxuriousness to them because you've got this human connection, which I think is like definitely part of the story of luxury, is that having this like considered human to human relationship that has been considered.
No, and I think you're absolutely right. I mean, a whittling, a spoon that you whittle is always my example, could be a luxury.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's not about how much it's cost, or but it's about a process and an understanding of materials, of shape, of form, all of those things, which then turns that into a luxury. And when you're thinking about manufacturing, I don't know, a handbag or something else, often the person who's making doesn't have the opportunity really to engage in a way where they are feeling that they're adding that personal value, because they might just be putting in a zip, or they might be putting in the lining, or they might be stitching on a strap.
Yeah.
But at the end of it, whatever that thing they've made, or the production line has made,
Yeah.
at the end of it, it becomes a luxury because of where it sits
Yeah. Right.
in the hierarchy of consumption and consumer demand. Because it might be Chanel, but if it didn't have the Chanel on and it was made by somebody else, it wouldn't be £13,000, even if it was exactly the same thing coming out of the same factory.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And then you're like, what's the inherent? Does it have this inherent luxurious quality to it?
Exactly.
Yeah. And I think a lot of it, and in terms of the materials that we're using, as I was saying, is that kind of stewardship of the material. The leather, a lot of the time, it's the last remaining part of this animal, whether people like to think of that or not.
Yeah.
But it's like this lived thing.
Yeah.
And you've taken this article that would have been neglected or would have had to been destroyed, and it's been upcycled into this like incredibly beautiful remnant of this thing. And the same thing with the wood.
Yeah.
Is that you've got these like they're things that have lived on the earth, and without getting too sort of like philosophical about it. And so that's it. It's just like, that's nice to be making these pieces that have had that through them, I think.
Yeah. And there's that continuous chain, isn't there?
Yeah.
What about tracking? So you've been talking about, you know where the wood comes from, you know where the leather comes from.
Yeah.
Is that part of the story for if somebody buys a piece from you, that you can say, oh, this wood is from such and such a forest, this cow is from that farm?
Well, no, I mean, we don't have the kind of like radical transparency.
Right.
We have worked with some friends who have got British pasture leather,
Right.
Sarah Grady and Alice Robinson, and they have worked to create a fully traceable leather. And so they've been working with farms with Herefordshire,
Yeah.
and the west of England, where they are producing leather whether you know exactly which field the cow came from. And they are producing, they're able to produce a really beautiful leather from it. But I think really all you can ensure is that where you're getting your materials from, is that there is like an accountability from that, and that is passed on all the way through the supply chain. I don't think it's an incredibly time-consuming thing to set that up, and I think that most people, they don't really care to that degree. But it's up to you as a producer to kind of do some due diligence, and like make sure that everything that you are not like literally producing from scratch within your own workshop. Like, we don't create the leather and we don't create the wood. So but we have to make sure that where we get it from is really well managed, is really, really responsible. And I think like that's it. You can have like, that's part of the luxury story as well. I think it's just as part of the consideration is that, if you make all of your stuff just out of ebony and made it out of like incredibly rarefied materials, and you can pass that off as luxury, but it's not going to be there in 20 years. It's not sustainable in that way. And then to make things and produce things in a way that you'd like to think that it could be made in 100 years like that. That's
an interesting take on it, because often people would think that if the material were like ebony, I don't even know if you're allowed to use ebony anymore, or you might be if it's sustainably farmed, I don't know, or sustainably grown rather than farmed, I don't know. But rare woods doesn't necessarily make something luxury.
No, but it has anything that has a kind of rareness to it immediately falls into a kind of luxury bracket a lot of the time, doesn't it?
Yeah, but what you were saying is that it doesn't have to be.
No, it doesn't have to be.
No, and that's an interesting point, because it's not it's the material, but not because the material is rare. It's the way you use the material.
Absolutely. I mean, there's a really wonderful designer, Fernando Lapos, who I love, and he makes like bits of furniture using like avocado skins and like loofahs and corn husks, and so he's taking these like incredibly humble materials and then transforming them into these like really beautiful kind of art furniture pieces.
Right.
And that's a whole nother take on it,
Yeah.
I think.
What about vegan leather? I mean, I laugh when I say it because I just don't buy it.
Yeah, well, I think it's good that you shouldn't buy it because it's a lot of the time it's just marketing kind of ploy, really. And
Yeah.
as we were talking about laminated materials, it's like there was a company called MycoWorks who, are a big, like, they're kind of like a tech startup now,
Yeah.
but they have produced like a mycelium-based
Yes, I've seen that.
alternative, and that's probably like the truest alternative leather in terms of it's actually sent to a tannery in Spain. They've got a relationship with a
Right.
Spanish tannery, and so what they produce is, instead of having like a collagen like fiber thing that you'd have in your in your skin, is that they use mycelium instead, and then they are tanning that kind of raw material to create like a leather alternative, I think. But most, like anything that's like fruit leather, like apple leather, banana, all these different types, they're basically laminated with plastic.
And that's, yeah, I was good. That's exactly what I was going to ask you. Is that the process must include some synthetic element?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and or some kind of finish in it, or there's something to strengthen it, because it won't. The reason why like people still use leather is because it has all these like performance qualities. Like,
Yeah.
it has really amazing durability, a really amazing tensile strength, has this kind of like suppleness, and you're able to use it across a number of different industries. And like historically, it was used in almost like every industry. And you can't really do that with alternative leathers. They just like break, or they degrade, and they will ultimately end up in landfill and leaching like chemicals out, really. And that, like, you have to have like really serious investment or to develop something. I mean, it's kind of yet to be done, but I think the MycoWorks is as close as we've got, really.
Right. Oh, so that's it. So as far as you know, there's no kind of vegan leather that is not chemically treated in order to make it durable enough.
Yeah, I mean, until you start seeing like car companies adopting it as a serious upholstery alternative in their cars, I think any high-end like heritage shoe brand,
Yeah.
if they started producing it, that would be a sign, I think, that some material has succeeded in like crossing that threshold. But ultimately, like, the performance is just not there. It won't have like a really incredible rub count. It won't have this like integrity to it that will withhold it, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I'm amazed at how much kind of press that gets, as being a natural vegan alternative.
Yeah.
But then who even knows? I mean, where those chemicals are coming from. But anyway,
No, I mean, when we did this, we did the big project that turned us from basically just me working in a workshop into like turning it into a company was we got approached by the fashion house Chloe under Gabriella Hurst when she took it over, and she turned it into a B Corp. She like really did try and do amazing things with it, and that was sort of through COVID. But she came from, I think she's from a Uruguayan background, and so there's like a lot of leather in
yeah,
that culture, and so she put a lot of leather into their collection. But it was saying like, this is a really amazing material. It shouldn't be. It's how you frame it. It just, you can be, I guess, from like an animal welfare perspective, but like no one's producing the leather hides for leather.
yeah,
That it's always taken as a byproduct,
yeah,
like almost always, and it's something that would just be chucked away. And so you've got, we would argue that from a sustainability perspective, that creating a material from something that would be binned and turning it into, tanning it properly. If you do what we would advocate for, tanning it in these traditional ways, there aren't many materials that you could get 50 to 100 plus years of use out of.
yeah.
Really.
Yeah, I wonder. I mean, do you know how old the oldest piece of leather is? I mean, just kind of random.
No, there is. There's a leather museum, I think, maybe in Walsall, and they do. Yeah, I mean, I was at Norwich Castle the other day, and there was a seal, like a wax seal box, but that was made out of boiled leather, and I guess it was like 700 years old or something. But yeah, they found Roman sandals that are, you
Yeah.
know, still not wearable. But
No. I've never, I suppose, never thought of how long a piece of leather would last.
yeah,
Tell me a bit about how you think of Otis being luxury. Why is it luxury for you?
I think it's luxury because the starting point is we're using these really amazing materials, which I would say, as I said, that the way that they have been produced has this inherent time put into them, and it's like it's a slow process. And I think time is one of the greatest luxuries that you can have, and it takes us a very long time to make each piece. You know, all of our everything's made with a mixture of machine, but mainly hand tools, and we make everything to order. And it's a slow process. It might take, 12 hours to make a log basket, or definitely a piece of furniture would take like a couple of weeks, I think. And I think that is a luxury, I think.
Yeah, it's interesting you said time, because the first thing I say to people when I talk to them about luxury, I just say, please don't say it's time. Uh, no,
Sorry,
but,
I've fallen into that pit, Paul.
yeah, no, but you haven't, in fact, because you justified the time. It wasn't about your time; it was about the
No,
time.
it's not my time.
Yeah, it's the time to make something, or the time it's taken to grow something, or the time the tanning process might take, the drying process might take for wood.
Yeah,
I mean, so that's a slightly different interpretation of, oh, my luxury is time because I don't have much of it.
yeah.
So the process with making a piece of furniture, you said it could take up to a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
And that's because why?
Well,
Just
so if we're making our day bed,
Yeah.
the timber has to be machined. You have to have all the joinery put into it, and that's all very, very carefully put together. It all has to be glued up. We sand and oil all of the pieces, and then that's corded all by hand. So just cording it takes a day.
Yeah.
It might take 3 days to stitch the cushion covers to go on that. And so you can very easily, and that's like multiple people doing that.
Right.
It's not. Maybe it would take like one super craftsman to make it. Would take like them 2 weeks, but yeah, probably if everyone's doing it together, it might be like a week for 2 people separately.
So and so just one of those drawers. I'm obviously obsessed with this the leather drawer covered.
I'm glad you like it. I mean, yeah.
How long does it take to make a drawer? Are they dovetailed?
Yeah, so they're dovetailed. They're actually dovetailed with a jig to make them sort of repeatable. But everything that's all solid timber, and so they're all they're even like lined with the solid timber.
Yeah.
And we wanted to do that, and the back is made out of shiplapped pieces of elm as well on that. And so we wanted to, we thought if we're going to make a cabinet, we're going to make it properly.
Yeah.
I think I wanted to put like a few different processes into it. I think, and I think it was like putting this really, really nice leather work and really like nice traditional joinery into it. It's a really nice combination.
And so, how long would it take to make a drawer?
Well, a single drawer, I guess probably take a couple of days.
Yeah.
I think, yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing, that you think that these things still exist in the world where people are actually making something, because there's so many components to that drawer.
Yes.
That, it's not, I mean, I don't even know how this, this is probably handmade. If it's
that'll be really nicely made. Yeah.
Yeah. But there's still not as many components in this as there would be in one of your drawers. Just saying.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's why I don't know why I'm so obsessed with that piece of furniture now. But so what's kind of next for you? What are you guys doing? Because you can't sell lots of furniture. You can't make 50 chairs.
No.
For example. Well, you could, but
we could
not.
do. We could do. I mean, the thing is, we do have kind of. It's amazing once you hit sort of capacity.
Right.
Once you really hit the ground running, you can. We make jigs for everything so that we can produce more than one if we want to. We're not just like a sort of bespoke setup. And then we did a version of our chair for Zara Home last year.
Oh, I think.
And so it was like a re-edition that was spec'd by them to have these particular material combinations on them, and I think we made 30 of them for them. And so also for the Chloe gig that we did, we made about 150 pieces over the course of like 2 years.
Right.
Not with our full team set up. But yeah, we're not really, there is like a limit to what we can do. And as I said, we make to order. So we do we've got stockists in America. And so like a lot of our work goes over there. And so we'll basically make things in small batches. And that's a nice way to work, actually. And that might be for retailers. But then if you come and put an order in through us, we're going to set up an e-commerce platform. So you'll be able to get most of our smaller objects of use. You'd be able to get them direct as well. And then I think mainly the furniture, people quite like to kind of customize that. So we just like to release new designs, and then we can kind of work closely with interior designers.
Yeah.
But I think that's kind of our focus for this year. And I mean, through Walpole, we're going to be doing our Brands of Tomorrow thing, and developing the business, I think. And so that's our kind of our main goal.
Yeah. And so it's interesting that you sell to America. I mean, Americans love leather.
Yeah.
Is it kind of south, like Texas way, or is it?
Not yet. It's actually mainly on the coast. We're sort of doing in New York and LA, and a little bit in the Midwest. We stock a place in Missouri, and it would be nice if we could get some places in Texas as well.
Right.
But they do, yeah. They get it, I think. And also, we are in a bit of there aren't that many people making our kind of work, I think, and it's very hard because we sort of photograph it, but actually you kind of really need to see it and engage with it. And I said definitely a lot of the leathers, people have not really seen that kind of leather before. It's like totally different to like a commercial leather. And so I think that when people really engage with the pieces, they can feel the quality, they can feel like the weight and actually like the integrity in it. Yeah. Then they kind of are converted by it, I think. Or it really helps to definitely like interact with the work.
What about Japan? Because they love that kind of stuff.
Yeah, they really love traditional leather, British leather. Yeah, I think it would be nice to. I think we'd like to develop some relationship out there with some stores, I think.
Yeah, interesting. And tell me about kind of your use of tech. So do you use any technology? Do you use kind of 3D printing, 3D scanning? I know you must use a laser.
We do use a laser, and a CNC. We do have that. I got that relatively early on when I could, just because it enables, just a really amazing level of accuracy. And I think for pattern making, it's really helpful for the laser. So quite often we can work to make templates. If we repeat making things, you get these knives made, so you get specific tooling, but it can be like really seriously expensive. And so we're able to generate these card templates that have got lots of information on them, and that's really nice. And then the CNC, we're able to get they might be hand joined in the woodwork shop, and then we'll bring them over, and then we will just give them like a rough shape, or it's just something that would take really, really, really long time by hand. And it means that we're able to offer like a really high quality piece, at like a better price point, I guess. If you were just like cutting, circular tables by hand, it would just take ages. But they're hand joined, and then we might have the shape put on them by the CNC, but then we'll profile them all by hand, and then we'll finish them all by hand.
Right.
And so it's not on all of the pieces, but like quite a lot of the pieces, they might have like one aspect of them that has just had like some digital part applied to it. And I think that's really kind of the future of like commercially available but high-end craft. And if you most manufacturers would have that. And I think like loads of furniture now is actually even produced on like really, really crazy five-axis machines that sort of basically, the huge robots that do everything. And I think no matter how big we got, we'd probably refrain from stuff like that, because I think really part of our work is to have that human element as the main element will always be a human made part of it.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's part of the luxury, isn't it?
Yeah,
Is
absolutely.
that,
Once you lose that, then you kind of lose the work, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it's the touch of the hand that makes something that much more special than everything going through a machine. Another conversation I was having was with my cousin, and he was saying to me, but if you can use technology to make luxury product. So something like a Rimowa suit. I mean, he didn't say that, but like, is a Rimowa suitcase? Do you know Rimowa?
Yeah.
Is that luxury?
Yeah.
And that's.
I think it's just like very well designed. But I wouldn't necessarily. It was like things that are just expensive aren't luxury. I think if you're getting down to that designation, I don't know if like can you reduce it like that? I don't even know if you can, just to like a price point.
No, but that's, I mean, but a lot of things aren't they?
Yeah. No, they are. I mean, it is like a characteristic of luxury.
Yeah.
Is that it's like, necessarily expensive. It doesn't necessarily have to be that way.
No. But do you think that customers who are buying at your kind of level, who are buying your type of product, are much more in tune or care about the manufacturing process and the materials?
Yeah, I think for people to make the move to come get one of our pieces, they kind of understand it. They understand, they definitely lean towards that.
Yeah.
That interpretation of luxury, rather than like heavily branded luxury.
Yeah.
And it's not quiet luxury in that way.
No.
Because I think our pieces still have character to them.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's interesting because there's so many, there's so many different, like you've said, there's so many definitions of luxury. Everybody's got their own kind of interpretation of what it is. And it's the question I always ask is, how do you create that difference?
Yeah.
Between what everybody else can have, but between a product that could clearly be defined as something as luxurious or an experience that distinguishes it from all the other stuff.
Yeah.
And that's kind of my thing. So tell me what your luxury is.
My luxury in life, and that's quite hard, isn't it? I guess my luxury is I do like a lot of cooking, I think. And luxury is like being able to make good food, I think. I think that's a big luxury for me. Well, I'm trying to find some time to do that. Yeah.
It's the time again.
It's the time. Yeah, it's time and the quality. Yeah, it is. I mean, it is that. I know it's not. It's time for myself, isn't it? But like, I love that. It just has a really nice feel to it. I think it's like a good thing in my life. Is that
brilliant? Otis Ingrams, thank you so much for joining me on the In Pursuit of Luxury podcast.
Thank you very much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. I'd like to thank Otis for joining me on this episode of the In Pursuit of Luxury podcast. I'd like to thank you all for listening, and for those of you who are watching, thank you as well. Please don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, to all our channels. And of course, you can get all episodes either to watch or to listen on your favourite platform. And at In Pursuit of Luxury, we have many other things going on. We have our executive training, which happens in London and in Zurich. We have Luxury Studies, the In Pursuit of Luxury journal, which is published quarterly. And of course, we have the In Pursuit of Luxury conference, which is a collaboration between Goldsmiths University and Ravensbourne University, and will take place in September 2026. And a big thank you to Henry's Townhouse, our sponsor for season 11 of the In Pursuit of Luxury podcast.